Welcome back to Secrets of Buried Stories. There are mysteries that fade with time, and then there are those that become legends, their unanswered questions echoing through the decades like a ghost. In the turbulent late 1960s, as California was undergoing a cultural revolution, a different kind of revolution was taking place in the shadows. A killer emerged who was unlike any before him. He didn't just take lives, he craved attention, playing a sadistic game with the public, the police, and the press. He gave himself a name, a symbol, and a legacy of terror. He called himself the Zodiac, and his true identity remains one of the most profound, buried secrets in the history of crime. Our story begins not in a major city, but on a quiet, dark lover's lane on the outskirts of Vallejo, California. On the night of December 20, 1968, high school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday parked their car on Lake Herman Road. They were simply two teenagers on a date, unaware that they were about to become the first known victims of a phantom. Another car pulled up beside them, a man got out, and without warning, he shot them both. Betty Lou was found outside the car, having been shot 5 times in the back. David was found beside her, shot once in the head. The motive was non-existent, the attack brutal and swift. For months, the case went cold, a tragic but seemingly random local crime. Then on July 4, 1969, the killer struck again, this time at Blue Rock Springs Park, another lover's lane just a few miles from the first crime scene. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were sitting in their car when another vehicle pulled up and parked behind them, its lights off. Moments later, the car drove away, only to return. A man approached their car with a flashlight, blinding them, and then opened fire with a 9mm pistol, the same caliber used in the first murder. He emptied the weapon into the car, then calmly walked away. Darlene Ferrin died from her injuries. Miraculously, Michael Mageau survived, though severely wounded. This time, the killer did not remain silent. Less than an hour after the attack, a man called the Vallejo Police Department. His voice was calm, almost monotone. He spoke from a payphone just blocks from the police station. He reported the shooting, giving the location and describing the weapon. And then he did something that would define the entire case. He took credit for the first murders on Lake Herman Road as well, chillingly stating, "I also killed those kids last year." He was claiming responsibility, starting his game. The true nature of this game became clear on July 31, 1969. 3 nearly identical letters arrived at the offices of 3 major newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. The letters, written in messy, blocky handwriting, gave details of the 2 attacks that only the killer could know, proving their authenticity. In these letters, the killer introduced his now infamous symbol, a circle with a cross through it, like a gun sight. But it was the other part of the letter that caused a sensation. Each letter contained 1/3 of a 408-symbol cryptogram. The writer demanded that the newspapers publish the cipher on their front pages, threatening that if they failed to do so, he would go on a kill rampage that weekend. The message was clear. This wasn't just about murder, it was about control, about forcing the world to play along. The newspapers complied, publishing the strange grid of symbols. The FBI and local law enforcement cryptographers were stumped. But the cipher was ultimately cracked not by professionals, but by a high school teacher and his wife, Donald and Betty Hardin, in just over a week. The message, full of misspellings and grammatical errors, was a rambling, chilling glimpse into the killer's mind. It began, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." He spoke of collecting slaves for his afterlife who would serve him in paradise. The message ended without revealing his name, a deliberate act of withholding the one thing everyone wanted to know. A week later, another letter arrived. It began with the chilling words, "This is the Zodiac speaking." For the first time, he had given himself a name. The terror escalated on September 27, 1969, in the serene setting of Lake Berryessa in Napa County. College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing by the lake when a man approached them. He was wearing an incredibly bizarre and terrifying executioner-style hood with clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes and a bib-like garment on his chest bearing the Zodiac's crosshair symbol. He held a gun and claimed to be an escaped convict who needed his car and money to go to Mexico. He calmly tied them both up with pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline. Then his story changed. He pulled out a long knife and brutally stabbed them both multiple times. After the attack, he walked over to Brian Hartnell's car and, using a black felt-tip pen, drew his crosshair symbol and wrote the dates of his previous attacks along with "by knife." He then drove away and, like before, called the police from a payphone to report his crime, calmly describing the scene. Cecilia Shepard died from her injuries 2 days later. Brian Hartnell, stabbed repeatedly in the back, miraculously survived and was able to provide a detailed description of the costumed attacker. The Zodiac's audacity reached its peak on October 11, 1969, in the heart of San Francisco. He hailed a cab driven by Paul Stein in the city's upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood. After a short drive, he shot Stein in the head, killing him instantly. 3 teenagers across the street witnessed the attack and called the police. The initial dispatch mistakenly reported the suspect as a black male, a critical error. 2 officers responding to the scene passed a white male matching the actual description walking away from the area, but due to the incorrect dispatch, let him go without questioning. The Zodiac had nearly been caught. A few days later, a letter arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle, proving he was responsible. It contained a small, bloody piece of Paul Stein's shirt. In this letter, the Zodiac mocked the police for their incompetence, describing how he had watched them from a park after the murder. He also escalated his threats, suggesting he would target a school bus full of children, an idea that spread waves of fear across the Bay Area. This was the Zodiac at his most terrifying, an intelligent, calculating killer who was not just committing crimes, but narrating them, taunting the authorities, and reveling in the public fear he created. Over the next few years, the Zodiac continued to send letters, some with more ciphers. The most famous of these was the 340-character cipher, which arrived in November 1969. Despite the best efforts of cryptographers for decades, this cipher remained unsolved, a testament to the killer's cunning and a lingering challenge from a ghost. It wasn't until December 2020, over 51 years later, that a team of amateur code breakers from the United States, Australia, and Belgium finally cracked it. The message was just as chilling and grammatically flawed as the first. I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me. Once again, he offered no name, no clue to his identity, only more of his twisted philosophy. The investigation into the Zodiac was one of the largest and most frustrating in American history, spanning multiple jurisdictions that often struggled to share information effectively. The lack of modern forensic tools like DNA analysis made the task monumental. The killer was careful, leaving behind few clues. The mystery became less about a single crime and more about a personality, a phantom defined by his letters and his symbol. Over the years, thousands of suspects were investigated, but a few have remained at the top of the list for both law enforcement and amateur sleuths. The most prominent suspect for decades was Arthur Lee Allen, a former school teacher with a history of disturbing behavior. The circumstantial evidence against him was compelling. He was interviewed by police in 1971 and wore a watch with the brand name Zodiac, featuring the crosshair symbol. A friend claimed Allen had confessed his desire to hunt humans with a flashlight attached to his gun. He was allegedly in the vicinity of some of the attacks. However, crucial evidence failed to connect him definitively. His fingerprints and palm prints did not match those believed to be from the Zodiac, and his handwriting, while showing some similarities, was not considered a match by most experts. In the 2000s, DNA recovered from saliva on the Zodiac's postage stamps was tested against Allen's DNA and was not a match. For many, this cleared him, though some argued the DNA evidence itself could be flawed. Other suspects have emerged, from journalists like Richard Gaikowski to more recently a man named Gary Francis Post, identified by a group of private investigators. Each suspect comes with a web of circumstantial clues, coincidences, and theories, but none has ever been definitively proven to be the killer.
The case remains officially open, but unsolved. After 1974, the Zodiac's authenticated letters stopped. He simply fell silent, his game seemingly over. Did he die? Was he imprisoned for another crime? Or did he simply grow tired of the attention and slip back into an anonymous life, forever guarding his dark secret? The identity of the Zodiac Killer is the ultimate buried secret. He was more than a murderer. He was a performance artist of terror, a ghost who created his own legend and then vanished, leaving behind a legacy of fear, unsolved ciphers, and a question that still haunts us. Who was the man behind the hood, behind the crosshairs, behind the chilling, misspelled letters? The answer remains lost to time, a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who are never unmasked.